Welcome to the Listen to This Bull Live Show. This is the show where we talk about bullshit in the insurance world, and the whole show is driven by the audience. All you have to do is write in questions and comments, and we will go down those rabbit holes with you, holding each other's hands. My name is Matt Mulholland. I'm the host of the show. My co-host just had a technical problem and got booted, so he's restarting his computer. He'll be in a minute. But we do also have a surprise guest appearance today that I'll introduce in just a minute. Today we're going to talk about wear and tear denials, improper installation, all that kind of bullshit. All I have to do is start by hitting this button. My wife says I need to turn up my mic. I don't know if this is helping. My voice is gone. I have been at a few conferences, and I got sick somewhere in between, lost my voice, and it hasn't really fully come back. So hopefully this is loud enough. Somebody else is going to have to type in and let me know if they can hear me okay. I'll do my best. But I did talk for a couple hours on wear and tear for one of John Senek's deals recently, earlier today as well. All right, so I got a surprise guest. You guys have seen him on the show before. His name is Taylor Bezic. He just got involved with Will Mitbo in a new PA firm called Prime Adjustments. Hey, Taylor.
Hey,
how's it going?
Good, man.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
So, can you hear me okay right off the bat?
I can hear you okay. I mean, you sound like you've got a 2-pack-a-day habit, but you're articulating well. So.
I've been trying to quit, but it's just so damn good, Okay. It makes other things bigger, I heard. Yeah. So maybe I got that wrong. Maybe it's backwards. I don't know. So we're supposed to be talking about wear and tear today. You in your career have done a lot of large loss, and you probably don't get the wear and tear exclusion nearly as much in large loss as you do in residential, but maybe I'm wrong. Do you guys get that a lot?
For me, it was never the determinant factor in a denial, but was often mentioned as kind of another, arrow in the sling of the insurance carrier when they were building a narrative that was going to furnish, effectively a denial or a repair or something like that. So it would come up quite frequently, if not just anecdotally, where they'd say, oh, this roof is, worn, torn. It's not, it's not presenting what we'd see as indicative of insert claim peril here. So you'd still see it quite a bit, but never, in places like Texas, sometimes it'd be the determinant factor, more so. But yeah, definitely on the residential side, the propensity for carriers to rely on wear and tear as the determinant factor in denying a claim is much more pervasive.
Yeah. John says, this is my favorite excuse by the insurance company. This is generally how it works. The engineers are sent out by the carrier to identify the cause of loss or to identify the extent of damages or something along those lines. And sure enough, the engineer goes out, and almost by clockwork, you can make some bets. If the roof is more than 15 years old, they're going to say, that's not hail damage, that's not wind damage, that's wear and tear. If the shingles are even slightly installed wrong, they're going to say, well, that's not wind, that's not hail, that's wear and tear, or improper installation, or something along those lines. And they use those experts to have that opinion. And then the denial letter comes back out, and it says, well, our expert that we sent out did not say that it was hail damage. They said it was wear and tear damage, or it wasn't wind damage. It was improper installation. And so we don't have any coverage for that. Here's the exclusion for all that. And we're not paying for it. And then you're sitting there going, how could that possibly be wear and tear? A hail event occurred. How could it possibly wear and tear? There's wind damage all over the thing. It's so obviously wind damage. How could it be improper installation? Wind was definitely involved. And we fight this tooth and nail. And it's a pain in the ass. So I'd like to tell you guys how the engineers think about these things. And maybe that'll help. Maybe it'll help. By the way, a lot of people think I'm an engineer. At the last conference I was at, I probably had 10 different people walk up to me and go, "Hey, you're an engineer, right?" I'm not an engineer. I went to school to be an aerospace engineer. I didn't finish. I was Air Force scholarship, and they were taking too many second lieutenants the year I was supposed to go in. And so they were taking volunteers to get out without paying them back. I didn't get the pilot slot I actually wanted, so I volunteered and I got out. That's my story. So although I have a background in the math and shit, I'm not an engineer. I just like building stuff. That's why I have that hail gun. So this is coming from a place where I can tell you how the engineers are thinking, but not because I'm an engineer. I'm going to tell you how they're thinking based on their own reports and white papers and websites. Taylor, how often do you go onto like Hague's website or their blogs and really read through their stuff?
It's been a while. I go more into the, I always like to look at the organizations that a lot of these engineers are part of, and then look at their code of ethics and pull out the parts where they're, mandated to uphold a certain level of objectivity and work in the best interest of the general public, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to wear and tear, and especially when it comes from an engineer, I usually find two major issues with that argument, especially in the instance where the carrier has already agreed that the peril in question has affected the property and the coverage has been afforded, whether that's below the deductible or not. If they are denying a component of a property based on wear and tear, what they are saying, so if they say the roof is denied, our adjuster said it was wear and tear, not hail. What they're saying is that there is no evidence of hail damage on that roof despite hail affecting other components of the property. And the covered peril and wear and tear are two mutually exclusive things. So if they're saying it's wear and tear, they're effectively telling you that for this one component of your property, the peril did not affect it whatsoever. And I'd go a step further with them to say, all right, if you're telling me it's worn and torn, would an old, aged, something that is stressed due to the normal course of use be more vulnerable to, say, a less significant or severe iteration of said peril? So you could, I typically try to use that language back against them and say, all right, well, we both agree that hail hit property because you're affording X amount of dollars in coverage for the deck, the fence, the paint, the gutters, the vents. But you're also saying in your letter that, this is worn and torn. We're not claiming that the roof needs to be replaced because it's worn and torn. We're claiming that the roof needs to be replaced because it was impacted by all the same hail that hit all the other stuff. And I agree with you. It is worn and torn. It's a 15 roof. It's probably more susceptible to lighter and less intense hail. So yeah, it's a worn and torn roof. It's going to get damaged easier. So thanks. Yeah, I agree. Pay for the roof.
So there's a few things there. And you hit all of them that I wanted to hit in this episode, all in a matter of 20 seconds. So I think we're done. We could probably call it quits at this point. Remington finally made it on, which is great. So engineers, when they say that that's not hail, that's wear and tear. One thing I do disagree with you on, Taylor, is that I don't think that they're saying that there isn't any evidence of hail or wind. So let me prove that to you. I'm going to bring up a document written by Donan Engineering. They have a white paper about wind damage, technical bulletin. It's called "Is My Roof Damaged?" or "Is My Roof Wind Damaged? Is Wind the Proximate Cause?" And this is a paper that talks about identifying wind damage when it's not actually wind. And here's some concerning stuff. I hope this puts you guys in the mind of an engineer. And by the way, if you guys are watching this and you came to the breakout that Remington and I had at RoofCon, we got through bullshit 1 and bullshit 2 about all the lack of data regarding hail and wind. This was bullshit 3 that we're about to go through. So we didn't get all that far because they only gave us an hour. They didn't realize who they wanted to speak at this thing. Should have given us like 4 hours. But, you know.
And Matt, we were having fun, man. We were having fun.
It was a good time. So let's talk about what proximate cause is according to an engineering firm. And then you guys can tell me if you think that this is the real meaning of approximate cause. For those of you that are listening to this episode, don't worry. I'm going to actually read this out loud to you. Proximate cause. This is in that donut white paper. Proximate cause is an important legal term. Maybe they're acting as attorneys already. Important legal term when studying whether or not wind is the true peril of a loss, and it is therefore important for anyone studying wind damage to understand it as well. The following example makes this easy to understand. This example is not easy to understand, by the way. Heads up, spoiler alert, this is confusing. Proximate cause is an act which sets off a natural and continuous sequence of events that produces injury. Without the act, no injury would have resulted. Anytime you act, you start a series of natural and continuous events to occur. Simple cause and effect. Like when you touch the surface of still water and ripples are created. Responsibility for an injury lies with the negligent act that produces the injury. I'm going to stop right there for a second. Taylor, have you ever met a negligent windstorm?
I mean, indiscriminate, maybe. Not negligent.
I mean, unless the government actually does have control over the weather, I don't think that there are any windstorms that are negligent. Maybe they do.
Wow.
I don't know. This is not a challenge, government. Sorry. I don't want a hurricane on my ass. Actually, I do. I chase those things. So they're saying that an injury is responsibility of a negligent act. I want you to keep that in mind as I keep going. Their example is interesting. For example, suppose you throw a ball that rolls down a hill. After the ball rolls down the hill, a stranger picks it up and throws it through a window, causing the glass to shatter. The glass shards hit a woman, cutting her arm. In this example, although you caused the ball's initial movement, your act is not the proximate cause of the injury to the woman sitting next to the window. The stranger's act is the proximate cause of her injury, and he should be the one to pay for her medical treatment because the stranger picked up the ball and performed the negligent act of throwing it through a window. That's the negligence. I'm going to scroll back up to the top part of this. It says responsibility for an injury, any injury, that's any damage, lies with the negligent act that produced the injury. Approximate cause, according to Donan, is the negligent act. It can't be anything that isn't negligence. Let's start right there. Tristan says, if the adjuster is immediately going to wear and tear, the adjuster typically had no intentions of covering the property prior to getting on site. It could be illusory coverage if that's what you're going into. I agree. So this is conclusion of this little paragraph. Therefore, one may frequently observe damage from wind, yet wind was not the proximate cause. I'm going to read that one more time. One may frequently observe damage from wind, yet wind was not the proximate cause. Donan is saying that the wind damage is caused by wind, but it's not caused by wind. If they are asked to identify the cause of loss, then they're going to try to identify what they believe is the proximate cause of the wind damage. We're still calling it wind damage when we're describing it, yet we're saying it's not wind. Aside from age, there are countless human factors that can make a roof inherently prone to damage from wind. When such a prone roof eventually becomes damaged, it may become inaccurate to conclude that wind was the proximate cause of the damage. The distinction is important. It may affect insurance coverage or affirm or limit one's ability to pursue a validly accountable party whose shortcomings only became known through wind. Put another way, wind is all too frequently nothing more then the straw that broke the camel's back, yet all the previous straws placed on its back, were the real proximate cause. Does this surprise you? Taylor, earlier you said that age and condition can make a property more susceptible to damage. Improper installation can make a property more susceptible to damage from wind. Does that make it not wind damage?
No. And again, by this standard, this is, I don't think this is a very good standard to apply. And the language that I've used when having to counter or being faced with the proximate cause argument by engineers is to say, well, let's look at the efficient proximate cause, meaning what is the most reasonable event that produced the condition we're observing on this roof, right? And when you're talking about hail, within the context of a claim where coverage has already been afforded, or even wind damage, we see this in hurricane claims down with Ian, where the roof is being denied, and they're effectively using that argument where they're saying, the roof is fine, but you've got X dollars of damage throughout your the rest of your property. All right, well, okay, you're saying that it's not the condition we're observing is not damage from this storm. So what is the efficient proximate cause? What is a reasonable person going to think is the catalyst for producing the condition we're observing, right? Is it going to be, age, and it just so happened to fail in coincidence with a Cat 4 hurricane that produced 140-mile-an-hour winds? Or did the 140-mile-an-hour winds have a hand in producing that? And if you're talking about the efficient, or you're talking about proximate cause, I can just as easily make the argument to say, well, maybe the code department's negligent for allowing that material to be put on that roof. Maybe the insurance company's negligent for allowing coverage to be offered for that property. Maybe the insured is negligent for living there. If you want to go down that road, you can go down that road. I think they're very picky how they apply it.
Well, when they say wear and tear, they're basically saying that the insured must be negligent then for not maintaining.
But the definition of
wear and tear be a negligent?
It's not. Wear and tear is normal injury or stress produced through the normal use of a product, through the normal use of something.
Sure, it's expected.
It's expected.
Let me go further down the rabbit hole on this paper with you guys. This says that when they're expecting to find wind damage on a roof, they're expecting it to find in certain areas before others. You guys have heard this before. Wind damage to roofs begins at the eaves, rakes, and ridges and corners. And so if they don't find wind damage there, they find it in the middle of the field, then there must be a reason that the areas that are normally the most susceptible to wind damage are not the areas that are damaged. The other areas of the roof became the more susceptible areas for a reason. And those reasons must be the proximate cause. So I want to show you guys another image real quick. But while I'm pulling that up, Remington, is there a legal definition of proximate cause that should be applied across the board?
Every state is different, so I just kind of want to say that. But I can tell you this: when you go to law school, you literally spend 6 months studying proximate cause. And there's all of this case law about the chain of events, who started it, at what point is that chain of events broken. So, like for the example, rolling the ball down the hill. The chain of events was broken when an individual picked it up and threw it through a window, whatever the example was, right?
Right.
So you go way in the weeds about it. But, just as a standard, if you will, is it causes the chain of events. It's the beginning cause or the beginning action that starts a chain of events. And look, at the end of the day, when has wear and tear made a shingle crease by itself? Like there's no such thing, right? So like that's my point that I argue is the number one factor of this crease shingle is wind. If there wasn't wind, there's no way this would have been creased, regardless of how old the shingle is or how new it is. No way it would happen. So that's my argument. And that kind of falls back on Taylor's like efficient proximate cause, right? But that for me, just a standard across the board. That's the way I would define it. And in the simplest terms, like I said, I spent 6 months studying this and took a bar exam on it. But that's for simple terms.
And passed it, by the way. You didn't just take it.
We get lucky every once in a while, you know.
Just you people that are thinking about the semantics of it, and don't realize he actually is an attorney. I learned that there's a difference between a lawyer and an attorney yesterday. I didn't know that. And for everybody else that's out there that thinks that those are the same thing, a lawyer is someone that went to law school and passed. An attorney is someone that passed the bar. Is that right? I can actually practice.
I'll be completely honest with you. I really didn't know there was a difference either. I think that's like old English type stuff. Where
I just taught an attorney what an attorney was.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That wasn't on any of the test, but I think that's some like old English stuff where you could just take the bar without going to law school. Probably 200 years ago. I don't know. Anyway. I say attorney, lawyer, whatever. I don't care. Tomato, tomato.
All right. I got an image up on the screen of a house that has a bunch of colorations on it. This was from a research paper that was created in a wind tunnel. They built this mock-up of a roof. They put all these pressure sensors all over it, and they stuck it on a turntable, and they hit it with wind from every direction. They spun the house inside the wind tunnel, so it got hit with wind from 360 degrees. And then they put the pressure differential all over this image. Those of you that are listening to this on a podcast, this is not a simple gable roof. The backside of this roof has 3 roof sections that are different heights, but those are simple gables, and the front has a gable coming out at you. So it's got a little ridge coming out, little, I don't know if a simpler way to say it, it's a gable extension on the front of the house. So looking down on this, there are red areas that have the most pressure differential, meaning the most uplift would occur at those areas. And the really bright white to yellow areas are the least amount. On the back of this roof, that's really simple. The areas that are most susceptible to wind damage appear to be the eaves, rakes, and ridges. On the front of this building or this house, where the roof is not very simple, it's got a gable extension coming out of it, it's got valleys. There are areas in the middle of the field that have a high pressure differential. And it's not what you would have expected based on everything that you've ever heard from Hague and other insurance carriers, other engineering firms. This will show you, if you look at it, that it depends on the shape of the roof and the direction of the storm on where the most susceptible areas are. That little square that's on the back there, that's the chimney. That has a lot of pressure differential around it because as wind wraps around that chimney, it has to speed up. It's Bernoulli's principle. There's a lot of uplift when wind changes direction. So, based on this image, what Donna was just saying doesn't make a lot of sense. But in general, if it's a simple roof, maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. My videos from Hurricane Ida, where we sat in there as the hurricane hit us, have shingles lifting at the chimneys before anywhere else on the roofs. Many different roofs, by the way. Okay, so there's that. They're saying that assuming wind is the proximate cause of the damage, roof damage from wind should logically initiate in areas where wind exerts most force on a roof. True, obviously, but that's not necessarily at the eaves, rakes, hips, and ridges like they're saying before, because it depends on the shape of the roof. All of that research that they're talking about that suggests that it's eaves, rakes, ridges, hips, and roofs, or hips and ridges, it's all on simple up and over or 4-sided hip roofs. Wind damages that occur in areas of the roof that are less affected by wind than other more susceptible areas. And those more susceptible areas, meaning the corners, eaves, rakes, hips, and ridges, if those remain undamaged, then the areas that were damaged that normally aren't the most susceptible need further attention, as these damages may not be, at least in part, attributable to wind. In other words, while wind may have made these damages visible, other factors may have played a key role in the cause of the damage. They are finding every possible way to say that the wind damage was not the result of wind. Does this? First of all, Taylor, have you ever seen that image that I put up on the screen before? Do you know what
No.
Do you know what research paper that's from?
Yeah, where is that from?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember. There was a Hague paper about it, but I don't remember where it originally came from. And Hague actually, that image that I showed was Hague's recreation of an image from the actual research paper. So I don't remember off the top of my head what the original paper was, but that's kind of a big deal. I got some more examples in here that'll kind of blow your mind.
Matt, do you have that video
of the wind at the chimneys?
Usually you can put it on the screen. If not, don't worry about it. But
I think I can.
It's
Yes,
pretty,
I do.
Pretty telling when you see that video of you, because you showed that at one of our speaking events at RoofCon, and you put it up on the screen. I was like, I just want to tell everybody here, this is actually Matt filming this. He was actually in the middle of this storm filming this and proving that their theory maybe isn't as accurate as they would like it to be.
All right. Let me make sure this is the right one real quick. Oh, not that. I want MP4 files. This one, I think. That one's too far in.
It sounded like it.
Yeah, this is it. Okay. Put this up on the screen. Bam. This is taken in vertical. This is from Hurricane Ida. See if I can lower the volume on it so it doesn't just take over the entire podcast. You could see that the shingles are lifting up around the chimney. Notice that the ridges and the rakes are intact. There was one little shingle popping up where there was a pitch change. But as I scroll around to other roofs, nothing's happening at the eaves. Nothing's happening at the ridges. That one had the chimneys. And now these are at a pretty far distance from me. So I'm going to try to zoom in on a roof slowly so I can find it. Okay, so there's another chimney. You can see the shingles popping up around it.
Yeah, right behind it in the middle there.
There it is. I'm going to go left a little bit, I think. The one to the right there is the same thing, right at the chimney. Nowhere else. Why?
Would it be a product
It's
of the direction of the
susceptible area on this roof for wind damage to have occurred. There's a lot of movement of air around those chimneys, and as air changes direction, Bernoulli's principle makes it speed up and create a lot of uplift. So this is the most susceptible area. There's flashing around that you're not supposed to fasten the shingles to. So there has to be sealant to hold the things down to the flashing. Maybe the sealant wasn't fully engaged. Maybe it was improper installation. Maybe. Does it matter? Does it matter? I don't know. Avoidable wind damage. All installation related things they go into. Here's some interesting stuff. When you are looking at a roof that was installed with the racking method, Donut thinks that you should go above and beyond manufacturer installation guidelines as a contractor and hand seal every shingle if you're going to install the roof. Even though racking is allowed and the shingle manufacturers don't require it, they're saying that you should do that. And since you don't do that, since the practice of hand sealing is time-consuming and laborious, it rarely occurs, resulting in most vertically racked roofs being inherently prone to damage from otherwise undamaging winds. Taylor said those words earlier. Non-damaging, otherwise non-damaging hail, otherwise non-damaging winds. Note that the other examples of vertically racked roofs that have also become damaged from wind due to poor practices of the roofing contractor. Their poor practices being not doing more than what the manufacturer requires. Note the lack of damage to the roof's rakes, ridges, corners, and the eaves that clearly indicate that it's the contractor's practice, not the wind, which is the proximate cause of loss. This is interesting. We got some sheeting actions. They're talking about that being a consequence of overdriven nails. Maintenance is an issue. This is a completely separate thing, but since it's up in this box, it blows my mind. Remington and I talked about this earlier. It says, let me zoom in. All right. Whoa. Oh, come on. Come back to me. Specifically, a minimum requirement to support a position of wind damage surrounds whether or not any delamination. And when Donan says delamination, they mean matting transfer. There's a lot of photos where they're pointing to mat transfer and they call it delamination. That's how I know that that's what they mean. A minimum requirement to support a position of wind damage surrounds whether or not any delamination of either both the top and bottom shingle, not the seal strip, but delamination of the top or bottom shingles themselves, not just sealant transfer, true shingle material transference. If any of that has occurred during a previous separation along the seal strip that bound the two together. If delamination has occurred, an argument in favor of wind damage cannot be refuted. This is one of those mic drop moments. If you can find mat transfer under any of your shingles, then according to Donan, it's definitely wind.
They can't rule it out at all.
And then they say, if no delamination, if no mat transfer has occurred, an argument in favor of wind damage cannot be supported. Which makes no fucking sense. This goes so far against anything that is in reality. You can have mat transfer without wind. That happens all the time with vandalism. All the time. And wind all the time creates damage to a shingle that isn't properly sealed. What they are actually trying to say is that true wind damage would occur to a properly installed shingle that is fully sealed. And so true wind damage would necessarily have to cause mat transfer in order to be solely the cause of wind. If wind is the result of improper installation or wear and tear, because the wear and tear or the improper installation made it more susceptible to wind damage, then the proximate cause of the wind is going to be wear and tear, improper installation. That's what they're saying. Are we in the minds of the engineers now? Do you guys understand what it is that they're trying to say? They want to blame the negligent act. They always want to say that the wind damage was more susceptible as a result of something else. And that something else is the things that they're allowed to put in their reports. And then the carrier is going to deny it for that. Does that matter? Let me lower this and we'll talk about this.
Like Matt said, keep on asking these questions. Keep on peeling the onion. You know, ask them, well, okay, I appreciate that they're saying that wear and tear is a cause of this loss, but are you saying that there's no wind damage to this roof? That's what I'm talking about, asking the questions, peeling back the onion, so to speak.
This is what I like to do. Taylor, you could tell me if you would do something like this too, as a PA or as a contractor. I would be the first one to say it. So most states, whether they're approximate cause state, efficient approximate cause state, concurrent causation, doctrine state, in most states, the policy will still pay for the covered cause of loss. If you have non-covered cause of loss and covered cause of loss acting in some sequence to each other, and when I say covered cause of loss, I also mean non-covered conditions, because they exclude conditions, they exclude types of damages. If wear and tear and wind damage exist on the same roof, and both of them are contributing factors to the loss. How do I know they're contributing factors? I can ask the but for argument. If not but for X, would Y have occurred? If not but for the wear and tear, would the wind have been sufficient to cause damage? If the answer is no, the wind would not have been sufficient to cause damage, then wear and tear, the age of that roof, has something to do with it. It is a contributing factor. I can't argue against that. Is that the cause of loss, approximate cause, the efficient proximate cause? I don't think it matters, because in most states and most policies, 95% of most states, most policies, the wind damage is still covered. Concurrent causation works like this. You have a non-covered event, condition, peril of wear and tear, and a covered cause of loss with covered damages, wind damages caused by wind. Does the policy specifically state that they won't pay for the wind damage if wear and tear resulted in wind? They generally don't specifically state that. There are some policies that specifically, very, very specifically do. Very specifically. And it's very obvious, because they will go into if a non-covered cause of loss and a covered cause of loss occur at the same time, then we will not pay for any of the loss if. You see how specific that sounded? If it doesn't say that, then the policy still covers the covered cause of loss, unless the state has case law against that. So it doesn't really matter. So what I want to do, I want to look for an ensuing loss provision, generally. Most wear and tear provisions have an ensuing loss provision that says we won't pay for wear and tear. However, we will pay for any ensuing loss that isn't otherwise excluded in the policy, which means if they're saying that wind damage occurred as a result of wear and tear, then wear and tear resulted in wind damage. And the wind damage is the ensuing loss of the wear and tear. If they claim that wear and tear is what started the chain of events off that led to wind causing damage, then the wind damage is the result of the wear and tear. It's an ensuing loss. So if you have an ensuing loss provision tied to it, then you've got coverage that's specifically carved out in the policy for it, and we don't have to fight against it. So this is what I would do. Hey, Mr. Adjuster, this roof is old as fuck. The seals are old. It's definitely become quite susceptible to hail damage. Hail is able to come down and cause granular loss in the form of small circular patterns of granular loss on the sides of the roof that were towards the storm. It was smaller hail that normally wouldn't cause any damage, but because the roof is so old, it was able to. So yeah, it looks like there's hail damage on this, cosmetic hail damage. That resulted from the fact that it's old. And I would say that. And why would I say it? The funny thing about insurance companies is they are only required to investigate what's claimed. They don't have to investigate anything else. So if you don't claim that wear and tear caused cosmetic damage, then they don't have to investigate each piece of that. If you say it, though, now they have to comment on it. If you want them to comment on the fact that the hail occurred because the roof was so old, and that's why this undamaging hail was able to cause damage, they have to actually write something about it if you say it first, especially if you put it in a report. If you're a contractor, be an expert. Write an expert report. Do you know what that looks like? It looks like what engineer reports look like. It's not just a photo set. It's an actual report right in there, in that report, with your photos attached, your conclusions. The roof was able to have damage from hail as a result of the fact that it's old. Small hail that normally would be non-damage was able to cause granular loss. Hell, you could even define damage because the policy doesn't do it. Do what the engineers do. This is how I define hail damage. This is what I looked for when I did my investigation. Because you're the expert, it's not defined. The experts are supposed to define it themselves. That's what they say. Why wouldn't you do it too? Now you could say, this is how we define hail damage. This is what we found. Now they have to comment on your definition of hail damage. They have to investigate what you claim. Claim that shit. It was old. It allowed the roof to be more susceptible to hail or wind. It was improperly installed. It was high nailed. It was overdriven. And that made the roof much more susceptible to wind damage. And then undamaging winds came through and caused damage. So undamaging, in fact, that there's not even any storm data to support it, which would be a lot of fun to say. Now they have to talk about it. If there's an ensuing loss provision in the policy, that could easily be sent in either by a public adjuster or by the policyholder saying, hey, you just said that wear and tear is the cause of the hail damage. Then the hail damage resulted from wear and tear. Ensuing loss of wear and tear. Ensuing loss is something that results from that. It comes after. The hail damage resulted from it. It therefore is a result of wear and tear. And with that ensuing loss provision, you've got coverage. Why are you denying the claim? Will you please put this on Spotify? Yeah, all of our episodes go on Spotify. It's usually a week late, but it goes up. They only have to.
I want to give you a hand of applause real quick, man. That was great. That was great. I mean, seriously, all the listeners, they need to rewind this and listen to it a couple times. I mean, it's really good stuff. I want to emphasize that. Really good.
Thanks, Remington. I only put you on here to be my cheerleader.
No, that's not true. We'll call each other out.
Next time. It could be fun.
No, that is great. But just want to say that I could tell you were in the zone, man. So Taylor and I were just sitting back eating popcorn, watching it in motion.
If you guys have questions on how ensuing loss works, there are videos on the Listen to This Bull channel that talk about ensuing loss and really dig into that. So we can talk about that a little bit more. A lot of what I'm talking about comes from some of the classes that we put up as well. But I want you to understand when an engineer, and correct me if I'm wrong, and interject if you feel like I'm wrong, Taylor. When an engineer says that's not hail, that's not wind, that's improper insulation, or that's not wear and tear, what they're really saying is that the wear and tear or the improper installation was the proximate cause, and that led to the fact that undamaging hail or wind has occurred.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I guess where I would differ a little bit on that is my mentality, and the argument that I've always used is that, again, in the absence of any anti-concurrent, it's covered loss. And what I often do is I'll counter with a situation in which you deny on the grounds of wear and tear. So say someone calls with a leak in their home and it's stemming from the roof. They're calling, the insurance company will come out and say, yeah, we need to, retape, do this drywall. But they're going to say, well, what about my roof? Well, your roof's just old. It leaked because it's past its service. That is a perfect situation to apply a wear and tear denial for that component of the property.
Yeah.
But in this instance, we're talking about
covered repair for the ensuing loss at the same time, right?
Well, this might be a bad metaphor, but say someone goes into the hospital, they're 96 years old, they got the flu and they died. Did they die from old age or did they die from the flu? They were far more susceptible to getting the flu because they're old. It's well known what happens. So, to me, it's the same type of argument. If the straw that broke the camel's back is in fact a peril covered under the policy, my position is that, barring any language expressly excluding that as a contributing factor, it's covered.
There's plenty of case law in other states that say that you cannot exclude coverage for a condition of wear and tear. If wear and tear is a cause of loss, wear and tear is a cause of loss is when the roof is just so damn old that it abruptly stops functioning all by itself. It's like, fuck it. And then all the water comes in because it's just so old. That is wear and tear as a cause of loss.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a condition.
We're calling in the claim saying my roof is old, I need a new one.
Yeah.
It's not.
If you need a new roof because of its age, if a complete replacement is required before property damage occurs from hail or wind, then it is wear and tear, and that's not covered. I've never seen a policy that covered it anyway. There might be one out there.
And here's my analogy I use for that, Matt. Besides the ooh thing, I love that too. By the way, is think about a tire, right? You got a 50,000 mile tire. You've put it to 150,000 miles on this tire. And it's just gone to the point where you didn't hit a bump, you didn't hit a nail, you didn't hit nothing, but it's just worn to the absolute pulp where it's gone, right? There's no more tread on this tire. To me, that's wear and tear loss. that I
Yeah.
attribute in the analogy I use for roofs itself, just like Matt did. Also, here's another argument, and we all use this argument all the time, but it really, back to 101 is don't insure a roof that undamaging winds can cause damage to. How about that? That's not my responsibility. That's the insurance company's responsibility.
And I think that
How about that, insurance companies?
well,
I mean,
Stop
seriously,
what the hell's wrong with you?
brought that up to Kerry before, and I think Steve Badger even talked about it in one of his speaking engagements a while ago. The question was posed, well, don't carriers have a responsibility to understand the condition of the property they're covering, or understand, I mean, if they are taking premiums from an insured on the understanding that they're going to cover the property, do they not have some responsibility? Because the one that always gets me is the pre-existing damage exclusions that are very prevalent in the Texas market, where it's basically a get out of jail free card for any carrier that comes out and says, if we identify anything that resembles existing damage, coverage is void. And you won't know that until we come out there after you file a claim, we investigate it, and we have time to repair and look at all the empirical evidence, look at the age of the property and the material, and then come up with a pre-existing damage argument to nullify coverage. And the way that the industry seems to be trending is the opposite, where it's all automated. There's no underwriting files. There's nothing. So I think that is an argument, but it seems to be falling on deaf ears for the most part.
Yeah. States like Texas are a little bit different in how they apply things, because you have to prove what is the primary cause of loss and different things, and what percentage of the loss. Sometimes with some of their policies, they'll pay a percentage of the loss based on the percentage of it being from a covered cause versus others. It's a weird state. Brian asked, how can you prove the age of the roof was the main contributor, which kind of goes into this Texas conversation. You'd have to be able to say, if not but for the age of the roof, the wind would not have been sufficient to cause damage to say that it was a strong contributor. But then you have to talk about what the type of damage you're talking about is. And that's where people go wrong. Wind damage is not the event. It's the type of damage that the wind event leaves behind. Wind damage is not the same thing as wear and tear damage. So the main contributor of wind damage can only be wind if this type of damage doesn't occur over time, just like age does. Hail damage is a very different thing than what occurs naturally due to age. So we could argue all we want till we're blue in the face that it's not wear and tear, it's not wind. Something had to act on this. An outside force had to lift this thing up to grease it. And that's clearly going to be the main contributor to a greased shingle. But wear and tear is going to be a small portion of that in many ways. If you could arguably say that the hail or the wind was sufficient to cause damage, regardless of its age, regardless of its installation practice, then wear and tear and improper installation has zero to do with it. Not a contributing factor at all. But if it is a contributing factor, what I've found to be working in a lot of states, and I've had a lot of contractors and a lot of PAs doing this, and it's working I haven't heard of anybody having a problem with it yet. How about that? It's working. Be the first one to say the roof is old, the roof is improperly installed, which made it much more susceptible to damage. And then non-damaging hail or wind, along with damaging hail or wind, came through and caused damage in the form of, and then describe what you mean by damage. If you just say damage, they're going to use their own definition. You have to describe what you mean by damage. It is an ambiguous term. So describe it. Everything is ambiguous. You need to be as implicit as possible about what it is that you mean by that, because they're not going to do it. So if you say what it is that you mean by that, they have to use your terms in the way that they talk. You want them using your terminology.
And the other thing that it does, it throws in a question that's for what would produce damage on a certain material. So a lot of what you see in engineer reports are, a shingle of this type is installed to withstand X mile per hour winds, or has this wind rating. Well, if you if you address the fact that it's, X amount of years old and in some certain condition, you admit that it's worn and torn, one should reasonably believe that there's an inverse correlation between the age and condition of a material and its resilience against its manufacturer, wind resistance or hail resistance, whatever it is. So you can then kind of diffuse these absolutes that the engineers talk in with regard to what size hail is required in order to produce damage on a material, what strength of wind is required to produce damage, because now you're presenting a material that is deficient from an age standpoint. It's deteriorated, it's worn, it's torn, it's moving its way through its service life to golden years, and you can use that to your advantage in saying, hey, I completely agree that this is worn and torn. Would that not make it more susceptible to what you would consider non-damaging winds if it was a brand new roof or whatever was just installed under normal conditions?
Yeah. I mean, susceptibility is one of those things. Like Remington said, if just because it's more susceptible to wind doesn't mean it's not still covered. The property is still covered in its current condition. So unless the damage itself is wear and tear damage, then they can't deny it for wear and tear as the only cause of loss. The problem that they're doing, the thing that is the real problem, engineers are required by law, according to their rules of ethics, to not omit information, to not deceive the public. And yet by omitting what comes after the wear and tear, that hail then came through and caused granule loss, by omitting that part, they're actually violating their own ethical codes. And that's what's necessary for this strategy of the carriers to work. They have to have a denial letter that doesn't say anything about wind or hail. All of it is wear and tear. All of it is improper installation. Here's the exclusion. And then to make it really work, to make it really stick, and this is what I think might actually be insurance fraud by the carriers, they have to omit the policy language that has the ensuing loss language in it. They have to hide that because they can't show to the policyholder that, oh, there's exclusion here, but there would be coverage for anything that comes after it right here. So they hide that part. You can't see that. And they know that you're not going to go and actually look for that language yourself. Policyholders don't know that it even exists. Hell, even if they did show it, policyholders have a hard time understanding what the hell it meant. But that's where the carriers are misinterpreting their own policy. To make this strategy work, there has to be two people involved that are hiding things. They have to hide that the hail or the wind is the result of the wear and tear of the improper installation. And they have to hide that there's an ensuing loss provision tied to it. And it's bullshit. But you could bypass all of that just by being the first one to say something about it so that they have to say something about it. Because if you can get them to comment on the hail or the wind that came after, then that eliminates the first person being able to omit that information, and you'll have a much easier time. And even if they still go further, even if you're a contractor, policyholder could easily ask, well, what you're saying is that the hail would not have caused damage if it wasn't for the wind, or for the wear and tear. But since it was old, there was hail damage. Do you guys still cover the hail damage in those cases? If they were to just ask that. This is why that question that Remington had me ask this attorney one time worked. And I didn't get it at the time. I tell this story a lot. I had a roof and it was old and it had wind damage all over it. And the engineer said deficient seals were the cause of loss. Deficient seals fall under improper installation stuff. Sometimes you could say that it was just deficient seals from wear and tear. So it was one of those two. And I'm fighting with the attorney that the carrier hired. I'm literally debating, as a public adjuster, another attorney. Probably not the smartest move. I told Remington about it. He's like, hey, just ask her. Ask her this. It's like, what? Ask her if the policy covers wind damage. It's like, what the fuck, Remington? Why would that work? I've already laid out why what they're talking about had to have been caused by hail or wind because something had to lift it up. Why would just asking that do anything? Just ask them that. Do you remember this, Remington?
Oh, I remember it.
Oh, man. It really pissed me off when it worked. She just came back. She didn't say anything. She just said, we're sending out an estimate for full coverage. That was the response I got. I thought Remington had called her and put her up to something. It's like, you know this person, don't you? You know this attorney. Is there something there? Do you have her? You blackmail on her? I mean, what is going on? Is that like code word for I will murder your family? I don't know what's going on here. I don't know how it worked. It worked because she knew that the policy had ensuing loss provisions and that the wind damage that came after does have coverage. And so when I asked specifically, is there coverage for the wind? She had to say yes. Now, an adjuster probably wouldn't do it that way. But Remington knows how attorneys think. That's why Remington was the right guy for me to call and what to do.
We actually, you brought me into your office and we sat down at the table, just went over a couple files. And that was one of them that you were, going back and forth sword fighting with. And I said, hey, just ask this one sentence. And it's hard, to get Matt to do one sentence, just one sentence. Does this policy cover wind damage? ? I was like, that's it. Send. But
I gotta tell you, that's how much I trust you. The fact that I actually tried that. That's how much I trust you. Right? Because that didn't make any sense to me at all. So anyway, if you guys are dealing with wear and tear, improper installation issues, there's generally coverage for the covered cause of loss that's associated with it. You just have to prove that the hail or the wind was associated with in there. If they want to say that wear and tear, improper installation was the cause of loss, the proximate cause that caused the wind or the hail damage to happen, then they're claiming that the wear and tear, improper installation resulted in that, which makes the wind or the hail damage an ensuing loss, which means you can go with what they're saying. You can go with the flow. You can lean into it. You don't have to be a dick. You don't have to fight against it. You can literally be their friend and say, you're right, man. This roof was not installed very well at all. And that's what allowed the non-damaging winds to cause damage. You're absolutely right. Please put that in the notes. And they will be happy to, because those are the things that they're allowed to say. At least until they get word that this podcast has gone out and they'll stop saying the part where the wind or the hail has resulted from it and make your life a little bit harder. So share this as much as you can, guys. I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about our sponsors real quick. And I have to boot Remington off to do it for a second, just because he's covering some of them. Boom. Actually, I'm gonna boot Taylor, since Remington's one of our guys and he's got the Ink hat on. So Ink is our newest sponsor. They deal with payments. They can handle all the payment endorsements for a claim. They can handle the mortgage endorsement. They have processes and procedures with every single mortgage company that's out there. If you are handling endorsements yourself, either as a contractor or a public adjuster, this company can do that for you and make disbursements. And they can do it all digitally. The policyholder gets the check in. All they have to do is take a photo of it, put it in their app, and Ink Payments can take it from there. And they've signed off on you getting paid. So your money's protected. It's going to end up being dispersed direct from Ink once the endorsements are there. Even the policyholder can sign off on it digitally. So it's like doing a remote deposit for Ink. Ink will also provide, if you want to, upfront payments. They do upfront payments for things that have already been agreed to. So Ink Payments is one of my favorite people that are in the industry. Claim Titan is a public adjuster CRM that is really good. It's really good. It's new, and they're still implementing features that aren't in any of the other CRMs, and they're still adding new features to it. But as a basic CRM that has everything you could possibly need, I told him all the things that I thought were absolutely necessary, put all those in, and then I gave him a few tweaks, and he put every single one of my suggestions in. Claim Titan is great. I highly recommend you look at that. Hook Agency, if you're a roofing contractor, they do an excellent job of marketing. They do such an excellent job at marketing. They think outside the box. They literally tattooed roofers at a convention. They tattooed a public adjuster at the convention too.
An educator.
I got a tattoo at a convention of the bullhead. I'm terrified of needles, by the way. I did that shit.
His wife still doesn't know, so keep it low. Keep it on the down low.
They're brilliant marketing. They're brilliant marketers. You should definitely take a look into Hook Agency. And if you get their hook, and some of the roofers did this, it blew my mind. They put their own Hook's logo on their bodies as a tattoo. They literally tattooed the hook on them, and they got a discount for future services from Hook as a result.
Matt, they had other people put the hook tattooed on themselves that aren't even part of Hook Agency.
blows
That's
my
how
mind.
good they are. I
That's
was
how good they
amazed.
are.
I was amazed.
I could never convince someone to put the bullhead tattoo on them, but that's what they did. Building Experts Institute is the school that I'm one of the founders of with Matt Danskin and John Tillman. It is masterclass level courses as in depth as you could possibly get. The stuff that I'm teaching in the podcast here stems from a lot of the research that I've done to put those classes out. We are right now putting out courses to compete against Hague's roof inspection certifications. So we have a whole asphalt shingle roof inspection certification set of curriculum coming out. We put a new course out about every 45 days. It's a membership program, so $109 a month. And the amount of knowledge that you get from that, you will literally become an expert overnight. It's go at your own pace. There's a lot of resources on there. I prove it. Just like I proved tonight why I think adjusters and engineers are saying it this way. I prove it on those courses. American Policyholder Association, one of our sponsors, handles or looks for and prosecutes against insurance fraud caused by insurers. Insurance carrier fraud, where they're committing fraud against policyholders. Love that organization. And then, of course, Huggins Law Firm, Remington Huggins, co-host of the show. It's his firm. If you want a law firm that actually knows what they're doing and has the relationships with the opposing side to get shit done, that's your guy, because they can't refuse that face either. Did you guys know that Remington was one of the top mock trial teams for his class? Or something like that? Were you winning awards and shit on your mock trial?
Yep. Honors,
Buff
all that good stuff. So
with his deeper voice back then, probably impressive.
You know, got to persuade the jury, Matt.
Yeah. Taylor, real quick, since you've been able to come on last minute, tell us about Prime Adjustments.
Yeah. So it's right now it's me and my partner, Will Midbow. I come from a background about too long in the public adjusting world, so about 12 years, I think. And Will was a business development representative and worked closely with first-party property and casualty firms, law firms for a long time. So we started the firm. You know, our goal is just to, not be the biggest, but help where we can, add value, and just assist policyholders any way we can. This is one of the ways to do that. Always looking for opportunities to give advice or give information or be a resource. So whether it's in a public adjusting capacity, appraisal capacity, or just, hey, I got a weird situation, what do you think about this? That's what we're here for. So we're looking to, expand our presence. Obviously we'll look at claims of any size, any type of peril. We've got experience in it. So big or small, we can usually handle it if it makes sense, if there's a path to resolution.
All right. So let me throw in my 2 cents here. And you guys almost never hear me say this kind of a thing because I don't like to blow smoke. I don't like to bullshit. Taylor's one of the best PAs I've ever met. Legitimately, he's a stud. All right. So if you guys are thinking about sending your claim somewhere and you need a good place, what states are you guys in right now?
So we are, I'd have to look, a lot, pretty much everywhere where there's, prevalent storm activity. The majority of the claims that I have right now are Front Range, Colorado, Minnesota, over into Missouri, western states, a little bit in Texas. Will is based in Tampa, so we've been pursuing a lot of the Hurricane Ian stuff coming out of Florida. So, we're licensed everywhere where we felt a need, and reciprocation and expansion of our licensure is fairly easy. So, for the right claim and the right situation, we can usually jump on it. So I like to say nationwide, but if someone goes and looks at my licensure, they're going to see I'm not everywhere. So, and I appreciate the endorsement. I really do. Your check's in the mail.
Oh, it's well deserved. Well deserved. I wouldn't say it otherwise, but all right. All right, guys. Well, that's it for the show today. We'll see you guys next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. If you guys have any questions for any of us, feel free to reach out. The new website for Listen to This Bull is about to come out, and if you guys haven't seen it yet, there are a lot of services offered on Listen to This Bull, including engineer report reviews, claim reviews, private training offerings, things along those lines. And check out at the end of this month the advanced policy interpretation class that we're putting on. 2 days of intense comparison of insurance policies, all residential property, to show the differences between them. Because if you can identify the difference between one policy and the next, then you'll see what those policies actually mean. So it's one of the better classes that we put on, and that's on November 30th to December 1st, 8 hours each day. It's awesome. You guys can walk away from that knowing that you can look at policies a little bit differently. And we'll see you guys next week. Peace.